Very excited to be here with all of you in this CCA class from ecfirst. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of slides. I was working on this, fine-tuning it last night as well, just making sure it's as up-to-date as possible. We will not be covering every slide. You will get a copy of these slides as well. It does provide, I think, some really valuable insight in terms of when you're on this journey performing an assessment or working, as I said, with the clients, getting them ready for an assessment. So in the CMMC ecosystem, I think when you're looking at it purely from the readiness and the assessment perspective, as you're well aware, because you've been through the CCP program previously, there are two designations, if you will. On the bottom left, RPO, as you're aware, the RPO organization, registered practitioner organization, assist organizations to be prepared for, get ready for an assessment. And then authorized C3POs, I think there are about 100 or so, whatever that number might be, C3POs in the ecosystem at this point of time. And then these are the ones that are actually performing the assessment. So a lot of these slides, I try to keep the content as minimal as possible. Don't want to have too much text on these slides, but I think some of these slides do have some content that is very, very relevant. I think it's always important when you start the assessment journey to successfully achieve certification, to raise some questions with the team that's going to be involved at the client side or the organization that is looking for an assessment to be performed. So, you can see the questions that are here. I'm not going to repeat these questions, but some important questions are, do we come into contact with CUI? And if we do, where is the CUI going? What's our CUI ecosystem looking like? For example, has the organization ever performed a gap assessment with 171R2? And as Mike has been talking about in the CCA class, everything with the level 2 right now at this point of time is based on 171R2, as you're familiar. But as we get into 2027, 2028, I think you're going to see that shift to R3, which is where the ecosystem is moving in the near future. Your current SPURS score, when was it last updated? Has it been affirmed by a senior official? It's very important to designate owner responsible for the CMMC so that you have a point of contact. Now, this individual may be working obviously with others in the organization. Budgets are important, and you need to think of budgets from the context of several variables. The assessment that has to be performed, remediation activities, lots of time underestimated by the clients, documentation, and we're going to be talking a lot about that. It's really important. And then the budget related to a C3PO itself. The MSP that you may be working with, or you may be a part of an organization that is an MSP. So making sure that you have the appropriate capabilities as well as the relationships with C3PO. And number 7, I cannot emphasize that enough, and there are about a dozen slides in this deck that relate to the system security plan. This is the Bible, this is the foundation, this is the concrete and the steel, if you will, in terms of building your CMMC program, the system security plan. So it's really important that this document be precise, be surgical, be lean, be mean, if you will, and to the point. Should not be a bloated document, but it definitely should be a document that I think, if I were to summarize, that should be a pointer to all of the 320 assessment objectives associated with the 110 controls or practices or requirements. And so your diagrams are going to be equally important in terms of where is CUI flowing. It should be included in your SSP. You don't have to do it, but it's always good to have the key documents in one place. So when a lead CCA comes in to review the artifacts like Mike would or Dr. Dwayne would, they're able to, it doesn't become too complicated for them to see the information. Just through some important questions, and I think this is just to take a step back and kind of really think strategically in terms of a CMMC engagement, whether it's on the readiness side or you're on the actual assessment side. And I think the most fundamental question is scoping. There's a whole document, as you are all aware, level one, level two, and level three in terms of scoping. And I think for those of all of you maybe taking the CCA exam relatively soon, it's really important to master the two documents that are the secret sauce in terms of the actual exam. One is the scoping document, know that inside out, outside in. Study that document. A lot of questions come in the CCA exam that directly relate to the scoping document. And the other document that I cannot emphasize enough is the assessment guide, the level two, level one assessment guide. Those documents are very important, along with the CAP document that Mike has been talking to you about. So these source documents are really pivotal in terms of your preparation for the CCA exam. It's important that the organization clearly define its scope. And my advice, others may disagree, my advice is really, I always feel when it comes to us humans, because we are now in the AI age, if you will, there's information, there's intelligence, and then there's words of wisdom. And when an organization is looking to achieve success with their CMMC program, it's important, at least initially, to keep the scope as compact as possible, keep it very focused, be surgical in terms of what's in scope, and equally important, what's not going to be in scope, right? And so from a business perspective, you got to make that determination, because the journey to achieve CMMC certification, I'm talking about level two, typically takes at least 6, 9, 12 months from start to finish. By the time you get the entire BOE, body of evidence, all ready to go for a formal assessment. So scoping, I cannot emphasize that enough. That's really the foundation for any organization's CMMC. Who owns this? And we've had several situations where we've been working, because we've been working in so many different CMMC assessments that we're learning with every engagement, is that it gets confusing. Who really owns this? Who's got the subject matter expertise, knowledge in terms of CMMC at the client end that's looking to get certified, right? So it's important to understand who is the executive owner, if you will, but also who's got the thought leadership or the knowledge leadership, if you will, within the organization on CMMC. Another thing that I will say, and you may disagree or whatever, but an organization cannot be successful, I emphasize cannot, if the organization is CMMC illiterate, right? So an organization may have achieved ISO 27001 or SOC 2 or what have you, these other certifications, but in order to be successful with CMMC, to take the friction out of the process, it's really important for the organization to establish that knowledge base on CMMC within the team that's going to be very much engaged. Build, buy, or partner, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that, because that does have a significant cost impact, and also the time and effort that it might take. And then how do we handle contract risk? And these are just a subset of questions. There are lots of other questions that have to be discussed and debated in order to frame what's going to be the scope for CMMC. Decision. So diving deeper into the scope, scoping is one of the highest impact cost decisions that you will make. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, it's really, really important to keep the scope simple, keep it tight, keep it lean, achieve success, get the certification. And then, you can always, once you've got that foundation, once you understand that process, you can always, take another look at the scope and expand that as required for your business. But then at a high level, you've got, in terms of, is the entire enterprise in the scope? Obviously, that's a lot of work. Can you keep it tight in terms of the CUI enclave, which is what a lot of organizations are doing? That's why you see the recommended seal there. And then are you working with an external service provider, ESP, in terms of a cloud or managed service that may be working? And this could also help you to save some things on the time side of things, and also be very efficient as you go through it. I mentioned earlier who owns CMMC within your organization. So there's one thing in terms of the executive sponsor, and you want to make sure that obviously there is executive buy-in to this, but also in terms of the program, who's going to be driving the program within the organization, which may not necessarily be the senior executive. So it's important to establish both executive ownership as well as CMMC program ownership. The decision whether you're going to build, buy, or partner, that's another really important one. It does have a significant impact in terms of cost, what's going to be the overall cost to the organization, but also the time it's going to take an organization to achieve success. So obviously, in terms of building your internal capability, you have full control over the program. If you outsource that to an MSP or an RPO that is skilled, and I've got some comments as well, is that may be the fastest path if the team is really experienced. And there are also differences between some RPOs. So it's very important to ask the right questions and to partner with the right RPO in the space, or you might take a hybrid approach. So how do you handle the contracts that may be coming in? And this is again from a business perspective. Do you already have contracts that may be requiring your organization to achieve complete the assessment, or you may be looking at the defense, in terms of the Department of War for new opportunities and all of that. So I think from a business perspective, it's really important to understand the state of contracts. Where are those? Because we are already beginning to see organizations that are even not directly impacted by the Department of War that are looking to require CMMC as a part of the contractual relationship. Many organizations, this may not be a surprise to any of you that are on here today, but they think of it as CMMC as an IT project. No, CMMC is an enterprise-wide project. You got to have the appropriate stakeholders within the organization involved in the process. There are requirements within the 110 controls, as Mike has been presenting in the CCA class, that do require collaboration and coordination and communication, if you will, between the various stakeholders across different departments within the organization. So want to make sure that from a thought leadership perspective within the organization, CMMC does get the appropriate platform, if you will, within the organization so that they can be timely. It's not just communication and coordination, but timely communication and coordination so that you can be very cost and time efficient. Working very effectively with your managed service providers is equally important. Not all MSPs are equal. Some are better than others in terms of, so it's very important to perform your analysis so that you understand, is this MSP the right MSP to be working? Do they have the appropriate CMMC credentials within the organization? And then shared responsibility, who is exactly responsible for what? That becomes really, really important in a CMMC engagement. Choosing your C3PO, that's another one. Not all C3POs are the same. Some are better and more efficient in terms of their processes, in terms of their capabilities, in terms of the methodology. It's very important to understand the lead CCAs because every C3PO engagement has to be led by a lead CCA. So it's very important to understand who are going to be the lead CCA that you may be working with, one or more within the organization that you're going to be partnering with in this assessment journey. Now, this is a really valuable slide because it goes beyond the content of the CCA program, but it kind of provides you with an insight in terms of what does the CMMC assessment journey look like. So some of you that are in attendance in this ecfirst-CCA class right now, you're going to emerge in the very near future as lead CCAs. You will be leading engagements for CMMC assessments within organizations. And so what you see on this slide are typical areas that an organization has to be looking at from an executive perspective. So first of all, engaging the C3PO that an organization may be working with, understanding what is the methodology that they use for the assessment process. The actual assessment process once the organization believes they're ready, can take anywhere from a few weeks to 2 or 3 months from the very start to the very end. The scoping conversation that takes place is really important to understand and make sure that the client and the C3PO are on the same side of the fence when it comes to defining the scope for the engagement. That lays the foundation for the engagement. Review of the readiness body of work that may have been completed. This could include all of the information, documentation related to policies, procedures, evidences, the artifacts, if you will, to make sure that those are looking like they're ready for the actual assessment. The formal assessment typically we budget, I know from our experience, we budget about a week of time for the client and for ourselves in terms of performing the interviews, looking at the samples of the documents associated with the evidences and all of that. It may wrap up sooner. It may take the full week. It just depends on the quality of the body of evidence that is ready. There may be findings, there may be poem items that may emerge. So you've got to be looking at that. But then at the end of that exercise, you obviously have the C3PO that submits to the CMMC EMAS system, and then the certificate is issued. So there are a lot of layers, if you will, in terms of from the start to the end. But these are typically the phases that an organization will go through in their assessment journey. And as Mike has been talking to you, and he will be talking a lot more, at the end of the day, when it comes to those 110 practices or requirements and the 320 objectives, the three areas of emphasis from the assessor perspective is to examine the documentation. There's a lot of documentation associated with it, hundreds of artifacts. The pivotal document is the system security plan, the policies, configuration records, evidence files, procedures, you name it. So all of those have to be examined. Interviews are typically performed, and like I mentioned, we budget about a week of time to interview and to learn more about information that may be in the documentation. And then testing takes place where there's actual demonstration of the capabilities that have been expressed in the documents, like policies and procedures. The pre-assessment executive checklist, and this is before the C3PO arrives. So preparation is really important. The more organized and the more disciplined that the client can be in terms of their assessment journey, the less friction there is going to be in the process. And so this is a really important slide from that perspective. Several areas that a client organization has to ensure that they are addressing from the assessment perspective. So governance in terms of identifying the leadership, the team, the stakeholders from a client perspective that are going to be involved, the appropriate documentation, whatever those documents may be, including the system security plan, technical controls or technical capabilities. An example of that could be the MFA or the CUI enclave associated with the engagement, training, knowledge in terms of the team or the people that are involved and are engaged from a CMMC perspective within the organization. These are individuals that may be working with or processing or managing CUI in some capacity, and then contracts and compliance. So these are typically the areas that an organization has to pay attention to before the CMMC formal assessment actually gets initiated. The outcomes, we've talked about this already in terms of once the assessor goes through it, in terms of the end result, is there a met? Is it not met? Is it not applicable? If it is a not applicable, I think as all of us recognize, it should be a strong business justification with supporting documentation. Why is this not applicable? Obviously, because that gets a lot of attention. Weak justifications will be challenged and flipped to not met. So organizations should not underestimate that even though it may not be applicable, it's really important. That does not mean documentation not required. You should be able to justify precisely why that control or why that assessment objective may not be applicable. The system security plan, we've got a lot of slides related to that, and I cannot emphasize, I don't have words to emphasize the relevance and the importance of the system security plan. This is what binds together. To me, it's like the spine in the human body. It's a concrete and steel in a building. It kind of lays the platform for everything. There are many different areas that have to be addressed within the system security plan. It is your security program, and it is a pointer to everything within the organization as it ties into the CMMC ecosystem. This doesn't mean it is a 1,000-page document. I think what we've typically seen is this may be anywhere from 100 to 200 or 250 pages, but it's very precise, very well organized in terms of connecting the three numbers that are the most important in the CMMC ecosystem: 14 in terms of the domains, 110 the practices or requirements, 320 in terms of the requirement objectives, all tied in together. So let's now dive a little deeper into SSP. So this is like I laid the foundation with in terms of the broader strategic things to think about in terms of CMMC. Now we'll just dive into one of those areas in terms of the system security plan. So definition, it must be very clear to everyone. What is it? What is it that should be included? What is it that should not be included in the system security plan? It's a representation of the CMMC ecosystem within your organization to the authorities, whoever you present the system security plan to. The assessors are going to, their initial thoughts. I know for me, I'm a lead CCA myself. Mike and I have been like Dwayne, Dr. Dwayne and others for quite some time. It doesn't take us more than maybe 10 minutes to thumb through a system security plan to say, you know what, organization's done a really good job. I can see it. It's well organized. You look at the table of content, you can see the 14 domains, you can see the pointer to the 110 practices. And then as you go to each of those, you can see the specific references like you have in the level 2 assessment guide, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever it might be, in those pages associated with those 110. And then when you get to that page, you can clearly see what are the artifacts associated in terms of policy. It comes in at least 3 layers, right? The policy, the procedure in terms of the process, and the evidence in terms of the control or capability that's implementing that process that's tied into that procedure. So any good lead CCA can go through it relatively quickly and say, like, this is well written, it's well organized, it's very clear. You should not, obviously, in my opinion, be including the policy language or the procedure language. You can point to those documents. So as the assessor is making progress with the actual assessment, he or she can be looking at those documents during an actual assessment. But there is no reason that when someone is looking at access control domain or some other domain, that they are able to go to that page in the system security plan and be able to see what is the name of the policy that ties into this, what is the process or procedure that describes this, how it's done, and then just the name of the files, if you will, in terms of where the control capability or the evidence associated that process is being implemented. That reference must be there in the system security plan. So the anatomy, kind of looking inside a complete SSP, and everyone may do it a little differently. It may be organized a little differently. This is just kind of a checklist, if you will, of some of the major areas that you should go back to your own organization and take a look. Have we addressed it? Have we addressed what's the system overview and process? Have we addressed the boundary and scoping? As I mentioned, really, really important. CUI data flow, that's all. You want to keep it very focused in terms of the CMMC engagement. Where is the CUI flowing within the organization? So in terms of where is it being stored, where is it being transmitted, where is it being processed? What are the roles and responsibilities in terms of names and titles of the individuals associated with the CMMC program within the organization? And then section 5 is the one that is that takes the most number of pages, if you will, inside a SSP document, because we're talking about 110. But this could be a maximum of 1 or 2 pages for each, depending on the number of assessment objectives tied into each of the 110. that kind of brings together the artifacts associated with it. One thing that I don't see on this slide, again, I was fine tuning a lot of things last night, is assets, ASSETS. So the assets are equally important because, as you know, in the CMMC ecosystem, you've got different types of assets, and you want to make sure you've got an accurate asset inventory. I cannot tell you how many times we've been in a CMMC engagement where we are performing the assessment and the client is really not clear about the asset type. So it's not just the asset inventory, but you got to be very precise. What type of an asset is it? Is it an SPA? Is it a CUI asset? You got to make sure that those are clearly identified. Components in terms of what should be documented, and this kind of provides a bird's eye view of some of the important areas that are addressed within the system security plan. And the one thing that I just wanted to draw your attention to on this particular slide would be, a slide on a section on security controls that have been implemented. Artifacts. You want to make sure that you tie in the artifacts with precision to the 110 and 320. That's the secret sauce. That's what the connection has to be made inside. And then maintain the system security plan. It's a living, breathing document, and it should clearly have version numbers. Who is the individual that updated this at what point of time? And that historic information, version history of the system security plan should be managed and maintained. Writing a strong system overview. And again, this slide is very valuable. And what you see on this slide comes out from actual assessments that we've performed. On the left side, what you see is it's a job well done. What the system security plan does in fact include, and it's done really well. On the right side, you'll see that the statements or the sentences that are in the system security plan are not precise. It may not be complete, or language may have been copied and pasted from templates and sample documents that may be out there. You want to make sure every word is reviewed, every word is very specific and relevant to the topic at hand within the system security plan. So we've got about 300 seconds left. Control your excitement. Don't be drinking yet. So defining your system boundary, scope, ambiguity is the number one cause of assessment delays and disputed findings. So that's where it's really, really important in terms of your hardware inventory. Everything must be listed, no exceptions, right? If it's touching or processing or transmitting PHI, what are the software and applications associated with it? The network diagram must match with the information that's described in the system security plan, right? If the SSP says that the CUI is segmented, but the diagram does not show that, which we see, then it becomes very confusing for everyone and the personnel in scope. That should be defined. Mapping CUI data flows, follow the data, right? No river flows straight to the ocean. Every river meanders and finds its own path to the ocean. The CUI journey in every organization may be a little different. You got to make sure you understand the flow of the CUI river within your organization. Follow the data. Understand every system and every component that it touches. And there should be an alignment between the CUI data flow and the network diagram. We see a lot of times, Mike has seen this, Dwayne has seen this, and I don't have much hair left and I'm pulling my hair out. It's like I'm getting confused because the system security plan is saying one thing. I look at the asset diagram, it's something else. I look at the CUI data flow diagram and it's not all aligned. Alignment is very, very important. So here you can see CUI entering the ecosystem, CUI at rest, CUI at transit, and the disposition of CUI. There are very specific requirements tied into it. And so it's very, very important to be precise. Precision, surgically crafted statements are really, really important in the system security plan. We've got 180 seconds left. Writing the control narratives, the three most important numbers in terms of the CMMC ecosystem, 14 domains, 110, 320. And it's really important that the heart or the core of the SSP is organized along these three important numbers. And so here's an example of a specific objective, what assessors must verify. And you can see the requirement as it's stated in the top button in terms of CA.L2312.4. And then here are the assessment objectives on the left side in terms of, A through H. And so it's really, really important that in your system security plan, for each of these, you have a response that's to the point, tied into that assessment objective. The anatomy of a strong control narrative: be consistent. So as you're going from one control to the next control, to the next control, to the next control, the format, layout, organization should be very consistent. So it makes it less challenging for the lead CCA as he or she is going through the engagement and looking at that body of work that you have crafted with your team to present for the actual assessment. And here's an example of an actual SSP where you can see what the actual assessment objectives are, the evidence references, and why is it that this is a credible body of work, if you will. You can see on the bottom right what makes this strong and relevant. You've been very precise with naming individuals. Each of the objectives is answered specifically. You've clearly identified the policy, procedure, evidence tied into this particular requirement. And now the assessor can craft questions that are based on this information. Makes the job less challenging. Here's another example of what we've seen in the real world in terms of, on the left side, what's really well done, that this is assessor ready. It's lead CCA ready in terms of the body of work. You can see the statements in terms of implementation, who's the owner, what is the precise evidence. But on the right side, the sentences are not precise, they're vague, it's not complete. And so that makes it difficult. Not applicables and inherited controls, that should not underestimate the effort in these ones. So you want to make sure that you're providing the appropriate, relevant context and language for NAs and inherited controls that you may be inheriting from an ESP or an MSP that you may be working with. Organization and evidence, as we've got about a minute or two to go, is assessors should be able to navigate through the SSP efficiently. So you'll notice in the header, it says SSP structure, secret sauce, and the word sauce is deliberately misspelled. Control your excitement there. The AO in the middle, we should probably underline that, stands for assessment objective. The secret sauce to a good SSP is to tie in the SSP at the assessment objective level. And so on the right side, where you see SAOCE, those are the areas that you want to make sure are appropriately addressed within the SSP document. Evidence labeling, want to make sure it's assessor friendly. And like I've mentioned before, it is important that the assessors are able to match the SSP narrative. At the end of the day, the rubber meets the road with the actual evidence, right? Because the evidence is what demonstrate that the policy that you've documented and the process that you've also have documentation for in terms of the procedure is all tied into that evidence. And that's what is going to reduce the friction, lower the cost, both in terms of time and money. Need to look at it from the assessor's lens because that's what the lead CCA is going to be doing. And everything, this is a slide we could spend an hour on, just on this one slide, because it is it may be very difficult to read all the bullets and all the content, but wanted to give you a feel for, and everything that you see on the slide has actually come out from real world assessments that have been performed and all the deficiencies and weaknesses that have been identified in the system security plan. So that's obviously a problem, and that's going to make it challenging for the organization to achieve success with its certification objectives. So there are deficiencies, issues, and challenges that you see on the slide. And when you do get some time after this class is over, take a closer look at it to make sure, because this will give you much better insight in terms of all the things that should be addressed in a credible SSP document. Red flags, another slide with very valuable information. We see template language. We see the SSP saying one thing and the network diagram saying something else. All of the 110 controls have been marked implemented, but it's not consistent when you start going through it. So that makes it difficult. Policies are referencing procedures that don't exist, or it's inaccurate. It's very important to make sure that organizations do take the time and put in the effort to ensure there's consistency across from what I call from assets to artifacts. So on the left side are the 7 phases, if you will, in terms of readiness, which are very important. There are no shortcuts in this journey, right? And on the right side is looking at the world from the perspective of the C3PAO, right? Which is where the CAP document comes into play. So when lead CCAs are working to assess an organization, they're going to be looking at that CAP document very closely, following the process very closely with that. But we should not underestimate the work that has to be done on the RPO side that's on the left, because that's what lays the foundation for a successful assessment. Some common findings during the assessment, and just giving you random samples, if you will. What was the finding? And that's in the middle column. And then what's the appropriate fix associated with that? And this just gives you a feel for at what level should things be expressed, communicated, documented in the SSP to make sure that it is credible. Quality checklist. You can use this as a checklist to take a look at, have we addressed all of these areas in terms of the foundation or the organization of the SSP document, the evidence package that must be put together, the control narratives in terms of, is it implemented? Is it not implemented? Is it not applicable? Is it inherited? What type of inheritance? All of those things with precision. The SSP action plan, really important to take a look at this when you are just about all done with the SSP to make sure that this is ready. It does give the assessor a lot of confidence if they see a really good, probably one of the first bodies of work that they will be looking at is the SSP. It sets the dial tone for the engagement. Top mistakes that leaders make on a CMMC engagement. One of the things that we've really seen is heavy focus on IT. It should be a business collaboration, and tremendous underestimation of the timeline. That's a big one that we see a lot from organizations. Oh, well, we are working with the MSP. We are ready to go. Everything's inherited. Still have to have all the documents and the artifacts in place. So it's important that leadership understands what it takes to be ready for a CMMC assessment. And then the journey, if you will, in terms of just getting the program to play, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 to 9 months, like I've said. But it's really important for the organization to be organized, disciplined as it goes through it, have a consistent team, meet frequently on a regular schedule as the body of work is being put together. So the next 5 decisions starting this week, and this is again as a checklist to use when you may be working on an actual CMMC engagement. These are some of the areas that organizations have to be reviewing as they look to work with a C3PAO. And that's it. You've got my email address. I just cannot thank all of you that are in the CCA class with ecfirst. We appreciate it. Control your excitement.